you'd like to join the program, it's 515-955-1400 or Twitter at JMike1400. It's StreamYard, by the way, audio and video on StreamYard. And for that, you can go to the Alpha Media Fort Dodge page. There you will see the audio and video of this program. And of course, you're going to see this slick looking dude that's with me here today. If you're on the video now, that would be Pastor Austin Hill of the First Presbyterian Church. He is the minister of Manville. All right, here he is. How are you there, Pastor?
I'm doing well, especially once I cut that hair off.
Oh, come on, man. At least you will regret it if you start to lose your hair later in life, and you look like you have the potential to do that, by the way.
I know.
But, I have 10 hairs on my head, I think.
I will tell you, so I went basically for all of COVID without cutting my hair, and I just cut it about 2 weeks ago, and there's less hair here than the last time I got my hair cut.
Well, that's a bummer. But anyway, yeah. I've grown to, I look at other people with full heads of hair who are my age, and I just look at them with envy. I secretly hate them, of course. With envy. Never met them before in my life, and they got this great hair. So,
well, Jesus does say something about coveting. Now, I don't think he mentions coveting your neighbor's hair specifically.
No, but he does mention coveting your neighbor's manservant, which I always thought was a little weird. But, I'm an older guy. I think those things are weird.
Well,
thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's manservant. I thought to myself, okay.
Well, maybe we can include hair on that list too.
Anyway, Pastor Hill is here. I could say that we are broadcasting live from Fort Apache here in Fort Dodge. Over the weekend, probably Friday night into yesterday, there's been a number of gang signs around this neighborhood. Specifically, on the convenience store that's just east from the old Fort Dodge YWCA. Now, I don't know what that's called now. But also on the north side of a building that we have here in a house. And the message is that the 900 and that would be the 900 block of 2nd Avenue North.
Mm-hmm.
That now belongs to the GD Killers, which is Gangster Disciple Killers, and another group. I don't know.
Wonderful.
But that's unusual to see in a town of 25,000 out here in the middle of the corn.
That's the kind of thing I remember growing up in Southern California.
Yeah, I was going to say, California, New York, and other places, certainly Chicago, are known for these sorts of large gangs. But how many people can there be in this gang? I've asked a couple of local people, and they say, they're punks with guns. Well, yeah, but they got guns. You forget, you dismiss that so easily. They may be whatever, but they do have guns. We don't want that.
Yeah, definitely. There's been a lot of ongoing conversation about this part of town and some of the ways that we can maybe improve this area. I am thankful that some community leaders have been having ongoing conversations about what we can do and actually have some plans to improve this part of town, which that's very promising.
Mm-hmm.
I think it'll take a little while. As initiatives tend to do when you get people from all these different parts of town working together and trying to coordinate. But I continue to be amazed at actually how well people in this community do tend to work together, those who are in positions of leadership.
Yeah. And
I think we're very lucky in this town to have that.
I'm unaware of these discussions concerning this part of town. Who's having these discussions? Is it a formal group? Or?
Well, so it's like the mayor, the chief of police. I heard about it in my work on the Greater Fort Dodge Growth Alliance, and they've been a part of it as well. And then so some local business owners and. So there's, I don't know if it's an official group as much as sort of a task force or a work group of interested individuals. And there are plans to have like some green space and some ways to maybe kind of improve property values and things to maybe even replace some of the housing. There was a survey that our church was asked to take. We're pretty close by here. You all here at the radio might have been given that survey too, just within the last few months, to look at different possible ideas to improve this area, different types of housing or zoning and stuff like that. So there is some research and hopefully then some steps to move forward that's going on.
You know, I wish people would stop using task force when they're talking about organizing a committee to discuss things. And,
well, I'm a Presbyterian. We're great at forming committees.
I know you are in the church involvement, and we don't have a pope. We have a meeting of minds of the people in the church, and that's what always drew me to the Presbyterian Church. But a task force is a group of ships who are shelling the land on Iwo Jima or off the coast of Vietnam. Then they get close enough where they send in boats where Marines run right into machine gun fire. Mm-hmm. Now that's a task force. Somehow I can't imagine Plouts being a member of a task force like that.
Well, yeah, that's a slightly different description than I think what our community leaders are involved in. But again, now I don't have
all due respect to Denny. He's my man, by the way.
Well, I don't have any professional experience in communities outside of Fort Dodge, but the places I grew up in, I didn't even know who these people were.
Yeah. You grew up in the San Diego area.
Yeah, and there, the city I was a part of, Carlsbad, I think had 80,000, 79,000 people when I lived there. And then you'd be right next to Oceanside that had 100 and some odd. And it's just one town that bleeds right into the next. And there's very little sense of your own community and those who are involved in improving your community. Whereas here, I really do think there's a positive, encouraging level of coordination among city leaders and people that I don't think every community has.
Well, the fact of the matter is, I mean, Iowa's overwhelmingly white. I mean, if you're not Catholic or Lutheran in Iowa, you can get the hell out of here. Poor Presbyterians are meeting at night by a torchlight. But that's always been the case in Fort Dodge, and I think it still is. You know, we used to say that around 1,000 black people lived in Fort Dodge. I don't know if they still do or not.
Yeah, I don't know what the number statistics are. Yeah, I'm not sure.
I don't know either. A lot of young black kids look around and say there's nothing here for me, and they leave, which unfortunately is the truth. You know.
Well, I mean, I'm
not encouraging them to leave. I wish we had a way for them to stay, but we just don't have the manufacturing base that we used to.
I think there are a lot of young people in general who are, as they're growing up, they're counting down the days until they can graduate and go elsewhere. And I think that's one of the ongoing tasks that we have as a community is to think about retention and to think about how we can create opportunities for new jobs in kind of all levels, you know, as you're saying, manufacturing and other kinds of jobs too. And I've even had some conversations with members of our church thinking about how can we maybe creatively be involved in finding some ways to retain people. I know our church, for example, has invested through the individual gifts of members over the years pretty heavily in education, and we have quite a number of scholarships available to young adults who are members of our church who graduate. Some of those scholarships are also specifically for Iowa Central students, initiatives there. So I think the more we can be doing as a community to really invest in the future generations in a way that encourages them to stick around.
Well, you have been over at the Growth Alliance.
Yeah.
Little Denny.
Yeah.
All right. Really, what should be the Christian response to gang activity? I'm not talking necessarily about black gangs. I mean, I don't think you had there weren't a lot of black gangs in San Diego because the Mexicans were already there.
Yeah, well, it was a lot of Latino gangs there. Bloods and Crips and all that kind of stuff.
Los Angeles is now a different case. They have the big neighborhood of Watts there, and there's a lot of gang activity. But then, of course, they have plenty of Hispanics for their gangs.
Yeah, I mean, it's all varieties. But I suppose I think the idea of community development is something that maybe at first glance feels secular, like it's not something that the church should be involved in. But I look at Jeremiah 29, not the famous Jeremiah 29:11, where there's this passage from the Old Testament where God says through the prophet Jeremiah, "For I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord, plans for a future and hope, plans to prosper you and give you peace." Not that verse, but a few verses before that, the prophet Jeremiah is speaking to these exiles who are living in Babylon, and he says, "Seek the welfare of this city. Seek the welfare of the city that you have been sent to." And I think that's a calling of God's people to seek the welfare of the city. You might have even seen there are some churches in town that have stickers or other kinds of advertising or paraphernalia or something that say "For Fort Dodge."
Mm-hmm.
And there's a movement among churches that came out of Atlanta a number of years ago that basically postulated this idea. So often as Christians, we are known for what we are against, right?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, we very clearly are against all these different kinds of things. And it was this Christian conference where they said, what if we as Christians were a people who were known by what we are for? And so not just what we are against, but what we are for. And what if we, as we follow the example of this scripture passage, Jeremiah 29, verse 7, I believe it is, if people knew that we were for our communities, that our churches were actively seeking the welfare of our communities. And so to go back to your question about what do we do about gangs or what's the Christian response, I think Christians really need to be committed to the development of their communities. So that happens through things like mentoring. There's a member of our church who mentors high school students, gives of his time on a volunteer basis with the student, sort of like an hour a week or something like that. And that's an incredible impact. And I know that that's one person with one student, but that's the kind of work that changes the trajectory for that student academically, which then will change their trajectory of their lives and their ability to get jobs. And that's the kind of stuff that we have to do not just once, but we need to do that writ large. But it only happens on these individual levels. So I think that's where Christians as individuals, we all can be thinking about how we can be investing on an individual basis in our community. And because of our Christian calling. And that over time changes the pressures, the social pressures to be involved in gangs and, those kinds of things, because people have more of a reason to make better decisions and to not kind of become a part of those things.
Well, I've said before many, many times, there have been a number of black kids in this town who are now 39 and 40 years old. They used to play in my backyard, or we'd go down to Reynolds Park and I'd throw the ball to them with a bunch of white kids too. And they were the happiest little kids you'd ever want to see. But over time, their eyes got hard and their entire countenance changed into an angry young person. A lot of them wound up in prison. And some of them have benefited, I think, maybe from my example of what a man was, because I'll tell you, when I had a flag football team, more than half of that flag football team came from a single parent household, and they were all women every single time.
Yeah.
But I guess the point I'm trying to get to is when you try to do that, and I paid no attention to the state of Iowa or anything like that. If a black kid was in trouble, I just brought him in the house and gave him a meal and tried to figure out what to do. Because if I turn it over to the state, then you're going to have a couple of overburdened professional people recommending a foster home. Yeah, which is living hell for some. Yeah, and again, there are people on the left, usually white people, which surprises me, who would condemn white men who want to be mentors to young,
maybe for fear of harm or something like that.
Cross-cultural pollution, and they're so afraid that white men will indoctrinate and oppress the kids. And I don't want to oppress anybody. I want to take a hungry kid off the damn street. Well,
I think
a meal.
And it's got to start with those individual interactions, like what you're saying. And I don't even think
it does, because I'm not a believer in state help in that regard. Some children are just abandoned, and there's no choice, which is sickening to me. But we need a greater awareness among the citizens of Fort Dodge that these kids aren't angry because they want to hurt you. They're angry because they got nothing and no future.
Well, and I think state help only exists because we as individuals have not stepped up to offer the support that is needed in individual cases. And so then you have, kind of a social security blanket to protect or catch people that have fallen through the cracks. But if we, and especially those of us in the church, if we could really step up our game by serving in our local communities. I think that need for some of that social support won't be there because one of the things that I've had actually the privilege of being able to see is I've been working with our police officers. Is first of all, I've seen numerous examples where
that's right. You're the chaplain now, aren't you?
Yeah. Where I've seen our officers who so often get a bad rap for, all of the stuff that is in the media. But I see them really trying to work with individuals and help get them out of the bad situations that are in. And as I'm working then with these officers, I see these living conditions that certain people are in, or the lack of social support that they have. You end up in somebody's house or in their apartment, and they've got, a makeshift sort of picnic table and a mattress on the floor, and that's about it. And you look at then the situations where they're in, and you think, well, it's no wonder that they're getting in trouble with law enforcement, because they don't have the social support. They don't have other people that they're connecting with in the same ways that many of us do as we think about. And that can make all the difference in the world. So I think so much of it is just actually establishing relationships with people. And I know that feels kind of Pollyanna, but as Christians, we have to be a people of hope, and we have to take that hope to other people, to the people who don't have it.
Faith without works is dead, isn't it?
Completely.
Hey, I have faith. Good for you.
Yeah, exactly.
What are you doing?
And I think the hardest thing about it is it's not just something that I can write a check and then just be done and move on.
You're damn right it isn't.
I mean, I actually have to be invested in people's lives.
Yes, you do.
And that's messy. It's time consuming. It doesn't always yield the results we're looking for.
You got to be prepared for ingratitude.
Yeah. Or even, I mean, we all have been in that place where people offer us help, and we're not going to accept it until we are ready to accept it. And especially as a man, it's like, I don't need your help. I'm going to be good and on my own, even though we all know that I really do need that help.
Who are you talking about there?
Well, myself. I think we all have had those kinds of experiences.
Oh yeah, I do too. I guess it's supposed to be some kind of character defect now that individuality and personal initiative and even an aggressive desire to move forward is some sort of male thing.
Well, sometimes it's just stubbornness. Sometimes, the more Sarah will point out that, that's my wife, the more Sarah will point out, hey, it's kind of cold today. Are you sure you don't want a jacket? Well, now all of a sudden, just because she told me I need a jacket, I'm like, I'm going to be fine without a jacket, and I'll shiver throughout the entire day just to show how fine I am.
Gotta be easy to point a finger at you, but I do the same thing myself. Been doing it all my life.
So, that is a tendency that makes it difficult, but we've got to be involved on that individual basis. I think it's got to start there.
Yes, we do. And there will be a problem of communication. There will be a problem of trust.
Yeah.
But nothing speaks louder than genuine action. And I don't mean something to make liberals feel good about themselves. Well, here I'm going to hold a turkey dinner, and then I'm going to go home. A public turkey dinner down in Pleasant Valley, and then I'm going to go home, and that's the end of story. That's so typical.
Yeah.
Let me wear my candidate's T-shirt down there while we're doing this.
I mean, that's where I go back to the example of this church member who is in a regular relationship with a student week after week over multiple years. That's long-term work. And that's only for one person. I mean, the return on investment, so to speak, is not that high. But if that work can help get one student on the right path, think about the lasting impact that has not only in that one student, but in their family and their connections as well. And multiply that by 1,000 and think about the long-term impact.
Think about how that would change you, because my experience changed me.
Certainly.
My experience changed me for the better, by the way, because I was an old redneck from a little town in Iowa, and I was, I don't mean to use black and white, but the black and white world was there. I don't mean it in a racial connotation, but you were with me or without me. You were with me or I had nothing to do with you. And if we did encounter, it was going to be an argument at the very least.
Yeah.
So that old thinking comes back, but I've learned through my experiences.
Yeah.
That it's just not true. The world is not a black and white place. Again, with I hate it when somebody comes in and tries to speak for white people or black people or Mexican people, because they are not black people. They are not white people. They are not Hispanic people. They're an individual. Yes, this is their ethnic background, but don't tell me about how black people think.
Sure.
Because black people think any different number of ways.
Yeah, just like white people or anyone else.
Anybody else. That's right. You know, there's a tendency in liberal politics to try to get everybody chanting the same slogan, but I'm opposed. Of course I'm opposed. Anyway, Austin Hill is our guest. He's a pastor over at First Presbyterian. We'll come back.
Divine Intervention is online at your 14
felt sort of like an oppressive censoring from the right. You couldn't watch secular movies or listen to secular bands and that kind of thing. You couldn't have these non-Christian influences and kind of a censorship that went with that. So then finally, as I got older, I got a little bit more, I guess, liberal in my media intake and not quite as concerned about non-Christian influences. But now it seems like it's from the left that there's that same kind of censorship. And unless you believe these certain things or behave this certain way, then you're not in. So it feels like, my whole life, it's either been people on the far right or now people on the far left. And if you're sort of living as a moderate, you've got people on both ends who are, saying who's in and who's out and who's kind of ideologically pure enough to be a part of the group.
Well, that's fascism, isn't it?
Or certainly, yeah. I mean, like sort of a fascism of ideas.
No, it's fascism, Pastor. When you insist that everyone think and talk and believe as you do, that's beyond fascism. That's totalitarianism. But that's what we hear now from some on the left.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's just, I lament because I used to hear that in the church in the right growing up.
There's no doubt there was that time.
Yeah.
I knew a Presbyterian minister was as fire and brimstone as any pastor you'd want to run into.
Yeah.
And I remember I can remember things that happened in the late 1960s, but not what I had for breakfast this morning. There were a couple of cute girls.
Uh-huh.
And I wanted to date them.
Yeah.
And
Heaven forbid.
Dance with them, but they couldn't go to dances.
Yeah.
And they couldn't see movies because they were, I don't know, the devil's work or something.
Yeah.
Butch Cassidy and a Sundance Kid of the devil's work, really?
Yeah. I look at stuff like that as evidence that we have a good God. When you look at these beautiful creations that people have created, works of art, and to me, that's evidence that the God we serve is a creative God who takes pleasure in God's creation. And we do the same when we create beautiful movies, music, art, all of that. But yeah, growing up, it was you can't listen to rock music because it's satanic. There's an old Smashing Pumpkins album, and back in the
Smashing Pumpkins,
in the 90s, and it was
that's why I had to get out of rock radio. I remember being in the 80s, I was playing Boy George, and I said, just after the song or whatever it was, I said, one of these days I'm going to still be on the air, and Boy George and Culture Club are going to be a golden oldie.
Yeah.
I don't think I can take it. Now you're updating it to Smashing Pumpkins.
Yeah, exactly. And they had an album, Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness, and it was a dual CD album.
What a title.
I know. And so they had 2 CDs, and I, to this day, only have one of those 2 CDs because my mom snapped the other one in half right out of the CD player after she was listening to the lyrics that I was singing along to. She walked right over to the CD player. Of course, this dates me, it was a CD player, but ejected the CD and snapped it in half and threw it in the trash can because of the evil influence of the lyrics.
You probably are getting to the age where some of the younger people think you're old.
Oh, yeah. I mean, bands that I listen to or talk about, oh, yeah, that's just from when I was in college, or that's just from when I was in high school. And I realize those bands have been around for longer than the kids I'm talking to have been alive.
Yeah, the Rolling Stones formed in the early 60s.
Yeah. Well, it seems like the older I'm getting too, the more I appreciate and resonate with older bands as opposed to anything newer. Like growing up, I thought 80s and 70s and 60s music was just, I didn't want to listen to any of it. I wanted 90s and newer. Well, now I'm really beginning to love 80s and 70s, even disco. I can appreciate some good disco now. So yeah, I don't know if that's a sign that, between that and my thinning hair that
kids growing up, buddy.
Yeah, exactly.
It happens fast.
Yeah.
You wake up and you got grandchildren, and the grandchildren are going to high school and graduating. Really something.
Exactly. I believe it's the author of Ecclesiastes who talks about how life is sort of like a vapor like that, and how quickly we go through the stages of life.
Sure do. Pastor Austin Hill is our guest. We should talk about the Christian response to gang activity or that sort of thing in general. We've been talking about old fire and brimstone.
Yeah.
Preachers, and certainly the Catholics were medieval when I was a child. They've loosened up now, mainly because of Vatican II. But there are still those in the Catholic Church who want a rigid standard of behavior.
Well, and I think we do really need to be able to work with people who are different from us, which I think ties into our first segment too, that is a part of talking about community development or changing the trajectory for young people in our community. That's bigger than what any one church or what any one people group can do. So that's going to take like churches working with community organizations and community organizations working with faith communities, and that reciprocity of people working with people that we 20, 30 years ago wouldn't have dreamed of working with. But that's also because I think in previous generations there were so many people in churches and so many people involved in churches that we had the luxury of being more divided.
Mm-hmm.
The Presbyterians didn't have to work with the Lutherans or the Catholics because each of those churches was so large themselves with so many volunteers that we didn't need anyone else. But now there are so many fewer people actively involved in the committees and ministries of the churches that I think we have to be willing to work with people who we wouldn't have worked with in the past, people who are different from us. And so that takes a certain amount of humility that things might not always get done the way I want them to.
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. Of course, when you're a young person, you fantasize a lot, but I didn't think life was going to be as it was. I didn't think I'd be here at this age. I thought I would be greater and on to something else, living in Los Angeles or some damn thing. And it was kind of a hallucination of a younger person, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But the thing that you find out is it's okay where you are.
Yeah.
It's okay that I lived here in Fort Dodge all these years, and my child was raised in Fort Dodge.
Well,
this is my town. This is my hometown now.
Exactly. And Sarah and I, we've lived here now for 12 years.
Have you lived, God, that long?
Yeah.
My God.
Exactly. And when we moved here at first, I mean, I didn't know that this town existed until we saw the opening in the church. And so we thought, well, we'll come here maybe for a few years until something better comes along and, go somewhere else. And this community has been wonderful to us. The church has been wonderful to us. The opportunities that have come our way, the friendships, the relationships, and the church itself. And it's truly been an experience that, when I talk to my friends, either from California that I grew up with, or when Sarah talks with her Pennsylvania friends, they're continually amazed too. You're still in Fort Dodge, and they all just sort of assumed that we'd be here for a few years and go somewhere else. But this place has been wonderful to us. And I try to tell that story because often people can't believe it, or they say, well, how did you end up here? Or why did you end up here? Why would you stay in a place like this? But this is now the longest I've lived anywhere in my entire life.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, I hope you stay.
And so we still love it here, and our kids do as well. So, I mean, there really is a lot of opportunity here, and I think that's part of the myth, is that people assume they have to go somewhere else if they want to thrive.
Well, when I was a kid growing up in Algona, Iowa, I wanted to get out of Algona.
Mm-hmm.
I did.
Yeah.
But this is as far as I got.
Yeah.
I worked in radio in Arkansas and on the East Coast in North Carolina for a few years. And I just wanted to come back home.
Yeah.
That's what I wanted to do. And when I came home, I came back to Fort Dodge.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way it was. So I don't know if I know what you're saying about working with other people who are different from us. I don't know if we're coming up with a real plan. Of course, we're not going to do it in 45 minutes of airtime.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a lot of mistrust.
Yeah.
Between black people and white people. Lots of distrust.
Yeah.
There are other reasons for the failures in the black community than just white oppression.
Mm-hmm.
We need to talk about those. If we're going to have an honest conversation on race.
Yeah.
And I found out that nobody wants to have an honest conversation on race.
We all want to have our talking points.
Isn't that odd?
Yeah.
We want to have, get past your white fragility where you get all defensive. No, I'm fine. I'm fine.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, white people won the battle of history. How does that sound to you? Because that's what happened. And it was ugly and it was brutal. And a lot of terrible things happened as a result of it. But I'll tell you, if the Chinese or the Russians or any of the South American commandantes would have come to the United States, the same thing would have happened.
Well, typically,
probably more brutal, actually.
There's the saying, absolute power corrupts absolutely. And I think whoever's in power tends to trample over those who are not.
Well, we could have that conversation, but the real conversation we have to have, again, is the mistrust.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, I'd like to mentor your child. Get out of here, Whitey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and I think what I've seen that has been helpful is there are already some organizations in town, even our school district, for example, and our school officials who really do strive to have the best interest of people in mind. And so if we can work with organizations that already are existing, I think of APHIS as another example. And if we can work within those systems where, again, that I have to relinquish some control, because as an individual, then I'm now associating myself with an organization that already has an established set of practices and norms. But as I do that, then I also get to borrow some of the credibility of those organizations as well. I look at the Lord's Cupboard, and the Lord's Cupboard just expanded recently. They brought their facility up to the main level instead of in the basement. They had this wonderful capital campaign. They're able to increase their accessibility so that more people can get the meals that they need. And so one of the only things preventing them from continuing to grow in their operations is having more people volunteering.
Well, Charles Clayton ran into that problem, I believe. Charles has been mad at me because I don't believe, I think those diversity training programs are nothing but a hustle. And I always think that any real strong social movement, there's going to be a few people walk away with a lot of money and nothing for the mass of the followers.
Sure.
I mean, Al Sharpton's a multimillionaire.
Yeah.
The Patrice Cullors, who founded BLM, is worth millions and millions of dollars. Obviously, most of the people who support BLM, Black people especially, aren't that much better off. I mean, they may be gambling that they're going to be better off, but Patrice Cullors and Al Sharpton and certainly Benjamin Crump, who Black people have accepted as their attorney.
I mean, the hard part about that is the same argument could be made about the church. I'm not gonna support the church because of the corruption that has been so rampant at the higher level, and that's a valid critique.
It is.
And so yet I also still would advocate for the good work that the church has done and continues to do in spite of the evil that has also been present within the church. So the hard part with any of these situations is we can always point to areas of corruption, or here's somebody getting rich over, whatever. I mean, even talking about climate change, and, I'm sure there are financial stakes, talking about divesting from oil and having a carbon neutral footprint. Meanwhile, look at all the solar and wind energy. And so, I mean, the money's got to go somewhere, right? And so I can kind of sit by and be a cynical skeptic, which sometimes feels really good to do.
Oh yeah, it's my job.
And and I can just kind of sit in that skepticism. But am I actually doing anything? That's what you said earlier. Sometimes maybe the best option is to say, you know what, this is maybe only accomplishing 70% of what I want, but 70% is literally infinitely better than doing nothing.
Well, again, I haven't talked with Charles Clayton for a while, but it'd be interesting to find out how many people actually volunteer at APHIS.
Yeah.
Yeah, because he does have kids down there.
Mm-hmm.
It'd be great to see a lot of volunteers down there.
Yeah.
Now that I think about it, I never volunteered. I gave Charles airtime to talk about it when he was putting it together.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. I got too busy. So what's the Presbyterian Church doing there, Pastor?
So that's a really good question. No, it's great, and I think that's a good question to ask. So, we've done as people have done in the past, where we write checks, because that's kind of the easy thing to do.
That's the easiest thing to do.
And I've had some conversations with Charles personally over the years. I've led some guitar classes there, teaching kids how to play the guitar for a while. I think the kids maybe thought I was a little boring, so we didn't continue doing that. I've been working with Charles to actually try to start up sort of a volunteer kind of aviation after school education to teach some of the middle school or high school students about some of the fundamentals of flying, to maybe get them interested in math and science a little bit, and to then use that to do like maybe a 6 to 8 week course that might end with taking some of the students actually up in one of the planes here in Fort Dodge. And so that's something that's kind of been in the works that Charles and I have been working on. I've got to finish writing a proposal to his board for that, which I've been
if the churches can get involved, it could bring back the Christian faith.
Yeah.
If they're successful. If they stop writing checks,
Yeah.
I'm not saying that donating money to APHIS or other worthy groups like that is wrong. In fact, it's correct to do so. But that's just a typical middle class way to settle things.
It's the tip of the iceberg.
That's right. Hi there. I feel guilty. I'm going to write a check. There.
Yeah.
I've done my part.
Yeah, exactly.
I got to play 18 at the country club or whatever.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, it was far easier to get some of our committees on board with writing checks to APHIS or other local organizations than it has been to actually get volunteers within the congregation to spend their time. And that's the challenge that we all face. Because time, money, we can always make more money and then write more checks. Mm-hmm. But time, you can't get that back.
That's right. You can't. We should start by eliminating the word boy from our conversation. I'm not a white boy. It's demeaning and disrespectful to call me that. There's no such thing as a black boy in his 30s or 40s or above, or even in his 20s. It's demeaning and disrespectful to black men to call them black boys, or Mexican boys, or Chinese boys.
Sure, yeah.
They're grown men. That should be respected. Shut the hell up.
Mm-hmm.
It's not cute anymore.
Well, yeah, I think having respectful language toward one another is huge as well. And part of that
That's
also,
what I'm talking about.
Yeah, and I think part of that, even more broadly, is doing the difficult work of listening. And so if people say a particular term or way of speaking is offensive, as hard as it is, I think for all of us, we need to listen to that and do what we can to respect that. And we can hem and haw about cancel culture and I should be able to speak my mind and all that. Well, sure, I should be able to, but if I want to be respectful and loving, I should probably think about the people I'm speaking to and how I'm speaking to them. Just in the same way that I can swear all I want, but if I'm going to swear in front of grandma, it's probably not a respectful and kind thing to do.
Yeah, I'm not comfortable. In fact, I punched a guy in a bar years and years ago. Typical redneck story. We were in a bar and we're seated in booths, and there were some guys in the booth next to us who kept dropping the F-bomb. Well, my mom was there, and I asked them to stop dropping the F-bomb. Well, the response was F-bomb you.
We'll just change where we're dropping it.
Right. So I said, please, don't do it. Please don't do it. My mom's right here. She's not of the generation. It's insulting to her. And I sat back down, and they F-bombed right away. So I jumped up out of my table, off the out of the booth, and I said, this has got to stop. And one guy got out of the booth and it looked like he was going to charge me, but I'm smart enough to, before he got to his feet, I smacked him. It was a good one too.
You had weight and movement there, momentum on your side.
And I sent him right backwards. So he didn't drop the F-bomb.
He got the hint after that.
Of course, we both had to go to the police station. We talked it through. That was back in my earlier redneck days,
I'm sure your mom loved how that night ended.
Well, she didn't mind I was trying to stick up for her.
Sure.
She was thankful.
Yeah.
But my dad was there.
Mm-hmm.
And my dad was a former Marine, and he'd had a couple of drinks. And so it was his time to get involved, and it just went downhill from there. So no, it wasn't really a proud moment for any of us, I don't think. It wasn't a proud moment for me, my dad, or the people that were seated in the booth that were using that sort of vulgar language. But things happen in life.
Yeah.
Things happen in life. And looking back on it now, I'm at least glad that I stuck up for my mother in that regard.
Well, and I think
we could have just gone someplace else, I suppose.
But I think it does. it's got to start with us. We've got to hold the mirror up to ourselves
Mhm.
and say, how is the language I'm using? How are the assumptions I am having about people? How is that preventing people from trusting one another?
That would be a question. Let's work on this, Pastor.
Yeah.
We have all these nice and fuzzy things to say, but we're not moving forward yet. But let's try to move forward. Bible at breakfast tomorrow at 6:30.
Yep. 6:30 at Zakirs.
All right. Thank you, Pastor Hill.
My pleasure.
Yeah, it's 3:00 in the afternoon. KBFD, Fort Dodge, Iowa. Yeah, 3:00. Oh, I must have. Okay, here comes the news now. There.
More help in more places. Lisa Brady, Fox News. The U.S. will share 20 million more doses of COVID vaccines with countries
charge premium rates for unlimited data, when in all actuality, you have no need for that much data. H2O Wireless, on the other hand, is on the exact same network as one of those carriers, but charges you half. The average family of 4 is saving over $70 a month without having to sacrifice coverage. And listen to this: unlimited talk, text, and 15 gigs of data for just $36 per month. Switching is as easy as swapping out your SIM card. You can keep your phone and your phone number. Here's how to get the best deal. This month, dial pound 250 and say keyword get H2O. You'll save an additional 50% off your first month. Dial pound 250 and say get H2O for this exclusive offer and start saving today.
Divine Intervention is online at yourfortdodge.com, on Twitter at JMike1400.
That's right. And our guest is Joe Coleman. How are you, Joe?
I'm well, Mike. How are you today?
I'm pretty good myself. I'm outstanding. Joe Coleman, of course, has a very familiar name in our area, so I won't get into his background other than to say he is a deacon of the Catholic Church, a devout and observant Catholic, and I certainly enjoy talking with him. Joe, we've had a little problem here in Fort Dodge now recently. These things come up every now and then. I seem to be broadcasting today from Fort Apache. By that I mean over the weekend, probably starting Friday night, actually Thursday, there was a drive-by at the house right next to the radio station. No one was hurt. A car was shot up a little bit, but no one seems to know, of course, what happened. Then Friday night, apparently, there were a group, unknown group, went around and posted gang signs on the convenience store that is across the street east of the old YMCA and in other buildings in this particular area. They're claiming this is their territory now. So, yeah, I'm in Fort Apache. I talked a little bit about this with Pastor Hill this morning. And this needs a response. It needs a law enforcement response, I'm sure, but I think it goes deeper than that, Joe. I have a tendency, and I believe you're in the same boat, as to see these problems as spiritual problems. And there is a spiritual problem in our town right now. As Christian men, we have an obligation to do something. Now, I ended my conversation with Pastor Hill by saying we've got to talk about this because neither one of us came up with an idea forward. We both agreed that writing checks is not the answer. I mean, it helps, I suppose. It helps a group like Charles Clayton's APHIS, which is a worthy group. But it runs a lot deeper than that. Have you given this much thought? Are you someone who sees conflict and violence as spiritual problems?
Well, of course. And as a general proposition, all conflict is a sign of disorder. And every disorder is something which is out of, is not something which the Creator has promoted. It is something that we achieve as a result of free will. If you want to get a little philosophical about it, or
I do.
Philosophical/theological about it. The problem, I can remember when the only time that we really had to worry about gangs, in the Fort Dodge area, although gangs have probably in one under one moniker or another have always been present.
Sure.
But the only gangs that we ever worried about were, Rebel Without a Cause and West Side Story.
Well, there used to be plenty of biker gangs around in the late 60s, early 70s.
Yeah, that's true. And you remember the engineer boots and the leather jackets with the and all of that stuff. But when you stop to think about gangs, what do you think? Gangs provide something that is missing as a general proposition in the lives of the members.
Mm-hmm.
And particularly with younger people being incorporated into gangs, it's filling the void of family. And I realize that's a broad, sweeping statement, but I think most sociologists would say that the root incentive for joining a gang is to achieve a feeling of belonging.
Yes.
That has been absent in one's life.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
And generally, again, broad brush, that is a result of a breakdown of the family unit and not achieving that feeling of oneness or belongedness in one's family. And from there, it gets a little bit more sophisticated, or that's a bad word, a little bit more involved.
Yes.
Than just that. But, you know, it's a shame because we live in a wonderful community. I'm sure you have too, Mike. I've lived in communities all over the world. And, I chose to come back here and raise my family here.
Mm-hmm.
I like to think of my children as citizens of the world, but I raised my children in this community because I thought, quite honestly, that it would give them a leg up in life as they fledged off the nest, out of the nest, because there are some very fundamental things here in town that I think we believe in, and not the least of which are those pillars of character that we see regularly in the Fort Dodge Messenger. Those things just aren't little niceties. Those are the building blocks of community, and hence the building blocks of a nation, and they all stem from the touchstones that are in the family. And you and I could talk for hours about how our culture, or at least how I believe our culture, is eroding the concept of family.
Oh, yes, and truth itself.
Yeah. So it's, I'm sorry that you're going through that. Actually, your studios, the first tenant in your studios was my law firm.
Oh, really?
Years ago. Yeah.
I didn't know that. Tom Dowd was here for years.
Yes, he was. Tom and John built the building, and they had their insurance agency down below, and the entire upper floor was our law office.
Oh.
And John Mitchell, John Perkins, Bill Lenke, Mark Cady, myself.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. So, it was not a war zone then, but I'm sorry it may be devolving into that now. I hope not.
Well, I've talked to younger people, or I should say middle-aged people who I knew when they were young. And they've said, "Oh, don't worry about this. This is punks with guns." And I said right back to them, I said, "Well, they have guns, so this is a serious matter. If they're talking the way they are, and we have had, well, as I said, a drive-by here on Thursday, they mean business. So I would not dismiss them that way, And further, there's a part of me, and you talked about a sense of alienation in the young people that gravitate toward gangs. I was kind of in a gang myself. None of us had a very good home life. None of us wanted to be at home. Some fathers were alcoholics or in prison or whatever. We bonded together, and I'll tell you, we were all Catholics. We were all white Catholic kids, but we bonded together, and I'm happy to say that all of us turned out more or less okay. I may be the black sheep. I don't know. I'm in talk radio, but that goes on in all ethnic groups. And I have been harshly critical of the Black Lives Matter movement and others who refuse to accept the truth of things or try to distort history. But I understand how a young black kid growing up in hopelessness would turn to this sort of thing and even violence. There's a part of me that knows that.
Oh, of course. That certainly does not make it right.
No.
And I don't believe that anyone argues that it is right. But we can talk about systems, and we can talk about circumstance, and we can talk about templates that seem to make those things happen. And they're in, I guess we call them root causes. What are the root causes? Now, you and I started out in the beginning talking about the diminution of the family as being a root cause of a variety of ills in our culture. And it's just simply there. And we have to confront it, and we have to see it, and we have to stand up, and we have to call it for what it is. Interestingly enough, Mike, this week the gospel in the for the seventh Sunday after Easter talks about the concept of truth and the duty, the absolute duty to seek the truth at all times. You know, I thought, holy mackerel, you can't make this stuff up. Here we are talking about a gospel that's written about 2,000 years ago, 1,900 years ago, and it is talking about a duty and an obligation upon the body politic, all of us who are, well, let's just call Christians, have a duty to seek the truth at all times. At all times.
At all times, that's right.
And I'm thinking to myself, trying to put it in modern day context. You know, the only person in the last week, 10 days, who has constantly been talking about truth is somebody who I think I mentioned last week that I never find myself defending, was Lynn Cheney.
Really?
And I'm thinking, but did you notice that the word truth was used repeatedly every time there was a snippet of a conversation with her?
Oh, boring.
Isn't that ironic?
Oh, yeah. Chuck Todd, the little squirrel that's on NBC, Meet the Press, just tore into Lieutenant Dan Crenshaw, a wounded veteran, Navy SEAL who was wounded, lost his eye in action in Iraq. And Todd just really ripped into him this week. And I thought to myself, what is your military record, you little squirrel? Have you ever really done anything for your country? Or are you just out here tapping away trying to get the clicks again? I mean, the shallowness of our society, to have somebody like Chuck Todd grill a war hero like Dan Crenshaw.
Well, you know, I think you and I can both agree that the taking apart of another person, whether they're a veteran or not, is not necessarily something that should happen. You and I have talked before about having discussions at a decibel level where you can hear the other person, and if you can work towards truth by assimilating facts, which everybody can agree on. And by the way, everybody always ought to be able to agree on a factual issue. They might not agree on the implication of those facts, but the facts ought to be pretty clear most of the time, shouldn't they?
They should. Yes, they should. And
but, you know, it's easy, you know, I hate to say it, but you and I are of the age that when we were the age of these young men that are leaving gang signs around you, you and I were subject to the draft.
Yeah.
And, you know,
yeah.
we were in the process that if we didn't have order in our family lives, Uncle Sam would train us and instill in us an order, and generally always had about 2 years to get it done, and for some reason seemed to be exceedingly successful during boot camp. Did you ever notice that?
Yes, I did.
Yeah. And you know, there are days when I think to myself, when we see stuff going on, that I think maybe the Israelis have a wonderful answer of a 1 year mandatory, both men and women, mandatory service for the good of the nation. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And it doesn't necessarily mean having to carry a gun. It can certainly mean something like the Peace Corps or the Vista program or WPA a la Roosevelt, you know?
Yes, absolutely. I think a WPA program is what we need in this country. The Republicans will freak out about saying that. But I have a question for you. Now, I was on Kevin Crimmon's podcast a couple weeks ago. Did you see that? Did you tell me you saw that or not?
I did. I did catch part of it. Yes, I did.
Well, here's the. I know this is going to be difficult for you because your dad was a respected Democrat in our area for a long, long time, but that's when Democrats were different. I told Kevin, and I told Kevin's listening audience that that you cannot be a Democrat and accept the platform of the Democratic Party and still be a Catholic. I think there is. I know that the Catholic Church welcomes everyone, but you cannot hold the same truths in both hands and tell me that both are correct. I just don't believe that. I don't think any Democratic Party member who says that they can do that is being honest.
As you will recall, we discussed a little bit about this last week, and
yes.
I told you that I believe that Will Rogers answers that best with that quip that he always said he wasn't a member of an organized political party. He was a Democrat. Yeah, we are. I think that the premise that you can't be a Democrat and be a Catholic, or can't be a Catholic and be a Democrat, that is false. That is absolutely false. Because to be in my party, I certainly don't have to agree with all the planks in the platform. There is no litmus test for allegiance. I don't have to bow down and say, if I don't happen to like this person who's the leader of my party, I can't be in my party. I
think there is a litmus test now to be a Democrat, frankly. I mean, if you look at the basic philosophy of the Catholic Church and the Democratic Party platform, nobody expects anyone to agree with everything on a party platform. However, the things that there's a disagreement about are pretty big things. I mean, let's talk abortion. I mean, the Democratic Party vehemently supports abortion rights. The Catholic Church doesn't. That's not a small issue. That's not a small issue, Joe.
It is certainly not a small issue, but there's a nuance there that I believe that maybe doesn't always come to the forefront. Like, for example, we talked about this last week with President Biden. I personally have no doubt in my mind that Joe Biden is personally opposed to abortion. But when he takes on the mantle of President of the United States to be president of all the people and swears an oath to uphold the Constitution and laws of the United States of America, he has a political duty and a legal duty to support the laws of the land, does he not?
Well, that's the Mario Cuomo argument way back in the 1984 Democratic Party convention, is that he was a Catholic. That's an excuse.
I got that.
That's an excuse.
That's the law. That's the law.
I understand.
Not an excuse. When I'm president of the United States, I have a duty to uphold the laws of this country.
That's right.
Now, one may call that an excuse.
That is.
One may call it that, but again, we're getting back to facts, the truth.
Yes.
The idea
list.com.
Michael Devine at AM 1400.
In the name of justice and the American way of life.
With 60 rounds of freedom.
That's right. This is AM 1400 KVFD, the voice of Fort Dodge. You know, Joe Coleman's actually a couple of years older than I am. But he has a better memory than I do. I don't know what happened there. Because while I was doing the news and the obituaries and that sort of thing, it suddenly occurred to me that I was going to take issue with something Joe said. And now I've forgotten what the hell it was.
Hey, I don't think you and I take many issues over anything.
No.
I think you're kind of an instigator, but you have to be in the job that you're doing and the profession that you're in, especially on these, if you will, talk radio programs. You have to be in order to stimulate conversation.
Well, a lot, one of the first things I was told when I wanted to get into talk radio was your job is to provoke the audience, and then when they call, to agree with them. Now, I haven't had that many callers over the many years, and people always, I see people on the street or in a restaurant or somewhere, I heard you say this yesterday, and I almost called you. And I said, well, why didn't you? And they said, well, I don't want anybody to people will recognize my voice. And I said, yeah, what's wrong with that? Yeah, if you want to.
There you go.
If you want to.
So your middle name is Provocateur, right?
Well, and I've taken shots at the Fort Dodge Messenger over the years because they don't really report the news. I mean, they do a great job as a community calendar, and everybody likes to see pictures of middle school kids at play. I love it. I've subscribed to the Messenger for years and I will continue to, but I don't think they really tell us what happens in Fort Dodge. So that was one of my prime goals when I took this radio program, was try to talk about what was really happening in Fort Dodge and what were the forces behind some of these ideas that propelled certain ideas forward. Now, the city people don't talk to me nearly as much as they used to.
Hey, Mike, you'll remember one of Steven Spielberg's first movies, Jaws.
Oh, certainly.
And
yeah.
There's a line from Jaws about a reporter who's confronting the mayor, and she talks to the mayor about these shark attacks, and then she goes to the chief of police, comes to her and says to her, why don't you get this out? We have an issue here. And she says, I'm a reporter in Southern Florida. And until a shark swims into the middle of Main Street at the stoplight and bites a tourist, there is no such thing as a shark in the water.
Well, they do have different attitude down those tourist areas, that's for sure. And that's okay.
But I think hometown newspapers, as a general proposition, are a little more circumspect when it comes to airing what might be considered to be our dirty laundry. Not that they don't, but that they're a little more circumspect.
Well,
because
I didn't take a lot away from Rush Limbaugh. He was a terrific performer. That was his real skill. He and Paul Harvey had that skill. They could use their voice magnificently. I've never been able to learn it, really. But Rush Limbaugh said that everything is political. Everything is political. All human interactions are political. I hate to think of it that way, but perhaps he was right. And I understand when you're doing, especially doing city, county, and state business, that there's a political element going on there. Somebody's ox is going to get gored, and somebody else is going to benefit. And I think that should be brought to the front.
That's your job. B, that's the paper's job. And C, that's the job of the citizenry, and why they have that open mic where you can stand up in front of the Board of Supervisors or the City Council, and you can say, hey, I'm a citizen. You work for me. I'm having this problem. How are you going to help me solve it?
Yeah.
That's Norman Rockwell, one of the four freedoms,
But so many people are afraid to stand up to authority. They really are. I mean, we're an obedient society still, not as much as we were, but there's still a lot of people who are afraid to stand up to authority for fear that there will be some sort of retaliation. Their street won't get plowed until the last dog dies during winter or something, or their trash won't be picked up, things like that.
Yeah. I agree. And I think that always needs to have the caveat, founded or unfounded, they believe it.
Yes, that's absolutely right. Several years ago, I was down at a city council meeting. They were still held over at the old city hall building, and a lady got up. And at the time, there had just been that river logo put on the law enforcement center in the Webster County building. You know what I'm talking about?
Yes,
yes,
I know exactly.
The lady got up, and she was not she was an intelligent woman, it appeared to be, and a nice person. Certainly, she was very polite, but she wanted to know why the city had spent $1 million on their river logo. Well, as some councilman kindly reminded her, that was not a city purchase, that was county. And further, it only cost $80,000. And again, it cost the county. But that's what she had been told, probably with a certain amount of fever.
Of course. And that's why people are, the latest craze now is running around and obtaining a magnet off of your refrigerator and holding it on your arm where you got your flu shot to determine one of two things. A, do you have what